Well, good evening, everybody. I'm David Dewey, Executive Director of the Chinese American Museum. We are the first and only museum in our nation's capital that's dedicated to the Chinese American story. I wish I could be there in person, but we are still very excited. The Chinese American Museum, in collaboration with the Calvin J. Lee Memorial Foundation, we are proud to introduce this annual essay contest series with an aim to bridge this cultural gap in Chinese American immigrant families. So we love these intergenerational conversations. So this series is Dear Mom, Dear Dad, and it's an open letter from the children, second generation children and beyond, and their parents. So we received more than 100 submissions to this essay contest, and each essay has been carefully reviewed by multiple reviewers. And we are deeply moved by the stories that it tells and the emotions expressed in these essays. So we really hope that this essay writing contest becomes an annual event. And the topics may vary, but the goal will be the same, to promote intergenerational dialogues. So let me introduce our panelists. First, our moderator, Paul Lee, president of Calvin Lee Memorial Foundation. Dr. Janelle Wong, professor of American Studies, Government and Politics of the University of Maryland. Dr. Patricia Chu, professor of English at George Washington University. Our first place winner, Scarlet Jacobson, from the Oregon Episcopal School. Our second place winner, Andrea Zhang, Livingston High School. And we also have some online panelists. Our second place winner, Nicole Wong, Brooklyn Technical High School. Our third place winner, Yuan Chung, from the Marlborough School, and two honorable mentions, Megan Toe from George Washington High School, and Matthew Wong from Cherry Hill High School East. So I turn it over to our moderator, Paul Lee, and take it away.
Thank you, David. Let me get into the camera so everybody can see me. People can see me. Okay, let me get in the camera. Thank you, David. We wish you could be here with us, and we had a great event, a great interaction downstairs. We really appreciate the collaboration with Chinese American Museum in DC, and it's been a very pleasant experience to do this important and meaningful project together. We really thank the participants here joining us on-site and online. I know some of you travel a long distance to come here, and we look forward to hearing your stories. I want to congratulate all of you too. So I want to hand the discussion to Janelle and Patty. All right.
So thank you so much to Paul Lee and the Calvin J. Lee Memorial Foundation, and also to the CAMDC staff and team for helping us organize this today. My name is Janelle Wong, and I'm a professor at the University of Maryland, and I direct Asian American Studies. And I'd like to just hand it over to my colleague to do a quick introduction, and then we'll get into the questions.
And I'm Patricia Chu. I'm a professor of English at George Washington University, and I also direct Asian American Studies there, but at GW it's a minor.
So I know you're all anxious to hear from the student writers, and in person here we have Scarlet and Michelle, Andrea, and Kelly. And then online we have Nicole, Matthew, Megan, and Yola. So we're going to get started. And I'm just going to go down this, the table and then turn it over to those online. Our first question is for all the panelists, and then we have some questions specifically based on the essays that were submitted. So those are more individualized questions for all of you. Our first question for everybody who is joining us today as a writer is to hear a little bit more about the writing process. If you talked to your parents while you wrote the essay, what was that like? Or if you spoke to them after you finished, how did they respond? Or if you've not spoken to them, tell us something about your writing process. And just as a reminder, we have many, many questions for all of you. So please keep your responses for this round to just 1 or 2 minutes. And we'll turn it over to Scarlet.
Right. Definitely since middle school, at least, I've been collecting stories that my grandparents and my mom have told me. And I have a little notes document where I just like scribble them down when I hear them. And sometimes I look back on them and when I wrote this piece, I was just looking through and I was like, these stories need to be told and they should be told. And I care about putting them into words and not just letting them be like a side note in my phone. I didn't talk to my mom when I was writing the piece, but after I finished it, I was tentatively like, you want to hear it? And I read it to her, and then she also read it herself a couple of times. But it was definitely very emotional because some of the elements of the piece are personal and it was just a very emotional experience rereading the piece and like sort of sharing those stories together. But I think it was what I needed to be able to read it with her. Yeah.
Michelle.
Hi everyone, my name is Michelle, and I didn't really talk with my parents too much like when I was writing the essay. Like Scarlet said, I definitely talk to my parents like outside of like just like casually like in the car or like after school on some days. I also was like in middle school, I learned a lot of like the specific stories. So more specifically, I remember in 6th grade I had a writing project and I wrote about like the Cultural Revolution and what my grandma went through. And so I think that kind of sparked an interest in learning more about like the stories of my family and my heritage. I don't think my mom has read my essay yet, but yeah.
Hi guys, I'm Andrea. So my dad sent me this contest and I was like, well, what do I write? And then I remembered an incident that happened to me in the past week, and then I started with a little anecdote, and then from there it just kind of expanded. And then when I finished, I showed it to my dad, and we definitely like talked about it a lot, and he was a little surprised. I think that's one of the things I wrote, and I think the contest definitely prompted me to explore more ideas and thoughts and feelings that I wouldn't have talked about otherwise, and so it was just a really great pushing off point for like a little bit more understanding.
Hi everyone, my name is Kelly Wren. So this essay was sent to me by my mom, and she asked me to write it, and I was like, Mom, like, no, I'm not gonna do it. It's fine, like it's an essay, come on. But I actually didn't tell her that I was already planning on doing it. I received this contest from my school, and so I was already writing, but I told my mom, no, I'm not gonna do it. I didn't really want to have to go through, talking about it. It's just another thing with communication. Except recently, my mom and I have been talking a lot more about stuff that has happened in the past. I think now that I'm older and more mature, it's really important to have these conversations, even if they're a little bit uncomfortable. I've realized that conversation and communication is truly the base for having a good relationship.
And then we're going to go online. So Matthew.
Hi everyone, my name is Matthew Wong, and when I was writing this letter, the unfortunate thing was I had I had just gotten into a fight with my parents, and instead of trying to vent about it and cry about it in my room, I found this essay competition, and I really wanted to write a letter to my parents to really express what I was feeling and what I wanted to tell about myself. Now, when writing this letter, I was really inspired by one of my favorite books, The Joy Luck Club, in which there was a connection, there was a distant connection between the parent and the child in the book. So I really wanted to base off that how whenever my parents would tell me their stories and how and maybe their expectations within the stories, I wanted to in this letter tell them who I was and what I had for myself. And in this letter, I really wanted to thank them, but I also wanted to make sure that they really knew who I was. Now, have I shared this letter with my parents? I shared it with my mom, but unfortunately, my dad cannot read English nor speak it. So when my mom translated for my dad, a little bit got lost in translation. So it was really difficult. It's still really difficult to communicate with both my parents, but I think both my parents got the main message of my letter.
Thank you. And Yuan?
Oh, hi, I'm Yan. So my mom actually reads a lot of my writing, but this is because I've never really written an essay where I like directly talked about my family or my relationship with her. So I think like this one, when I was writing it, I was really, really nervous, and I actually did not show it to her until after I submitted it. But yeah, definitely writing it, I had to, kind of go back and reflect on like everything we went through and, all the fights and also the good moments that we've had. So it was very difficult writing it, but I think afterwards, like it was really very worth it.
Thank you. Megan?
Hi everyone, my name is Megan, and when it came to entering for this contest, I also did not tell my parents beforehand. I had this fear of like embarrassing myself, and when I got the notification from the Chinese American Museum, it was like a wave of empowerment, and I couldn't help but to like share the news with my parents. I remember seeing my mom's reaction to it, and it was really something. She had tears in her eyes, and I could tell that she felt really appreciated and recognized through my writing. It was very powerful. And even my dad, although he didn't cry, his face changed when reading my essay, and it felt like the words touched him really deeply. And just being vulnerable and opening up with my writing process just meant a lot. It was like a bit scary for them to read it, but it turned out to be worth it. It's really amazing how vulnerability can forge like such strong connections. It showed me that sharing our vulnerabilities with our loved ones can create deeper bonds, and it brings us together. So yeah, their reactions were like validating. It reminds me of the importance of embracing vulnerability and continuing on this journey as a family, and I'm really grateful.
Thank you. Nicole?
Hi, my name is Nicole. So my mom and dad didn't know I was gonna write this. Oh yeah, and also I wrote it specifically to my mom because I feel like I'm more closer to her because my dad, like, he works okay. My parents, like, we used to live in Georgia, and then like we moved to New York, and then my dad stayed in Georgia, so me and my mom, my sister stayed in New York, and I wasn't really close to my dad that time, so I didn't want to write it to my dad because I feel like I just want to like focus on like one parent, so I chose my mom, even though like I love my dad, like there's like another chance for me to write it, but I didn't tell my mom I was writing it. My mom didn't even know I was writing it. And I showed it to her after I received a notification like I won. And I didn't even know I won until like 2 weeks later when I emailed like Clarissa. I was like, oh, is the results out? And she's like, oh yeah, you got second. I was like, oh yeah, I'm really happy. Like, I feel like this was such a vulnerable experience. Like when I was writing it, it was within a span of like maybe like 3 or 4 days. And I remember I also got into an argument with my parents, like my mom, it was about like something about like the restaurant. I'm currently at work right now, so you can see the background, but we were arguing about like the restaurant and how like she wants me to like dedicate more time to working and like going after school. And I was just telling her how I really feel. And I like during writing the essay, I was thinking back to like how my mom treated me when I was like younger to like how she treats me now. And I feel like ever since I was little, I was really insecure and I was just really scared to like tell my parents stuff. Like if I wanted something, like if I was hungry, I wouldn't tell them I was hungry because I just feel like I don't mean a lot to them. Like I always had this insecurity and I was addressing in my essay. And I feel like and it was so hard for me to proofread the essay because I was like crying while proofing the essay. And I was just like experiencing emotions over again. And when my mom read the essay, she was like, I had to translate to her in Chinese using this like Chinese website, but like it wasn't as accurate. Like it couldn't really show how it really felt. And when she was reading it, she started crying and she was like, I didn't know you were this sad. And I was like, there's a lot of things that I just don't want to express to other people. And I was just really happy that I got a chance to like tell my mom how I really feel.
Thank you so much for starting us off with these comments. And now we have some questions that are directly about your writing.
Yes, so, thank you, also, thank you also for starting us off with these wonderful comments. So I want to start off with a question for Scarlet, and I'm aware that the essays have not yet been posted, and we're hoping that those who wish to have your essays posted online will give permission, and that so that everybody will be able to see those essays. But for now, I'm going to briefly describe Scarlet's essay before asking a question for you. Scarlet Jacobson portrays her immigrant grandmother as having three lives: the one she left behind, one she built with her husband and children in Los Angeles, and the one she will live, even her descendants' memories. After colorfully recounting the bittersweet relationships her grandmother built with husband, children, and grandchildren, the author asks, 3 generations of daughters close like a circle does, and you tell me what changed. This essay stands out for its vivid metaphors, its prickly yet empathetic sketches of 3 generations of family members, and its awareness of how people and families change in the course of a lifetime. So for Scarlet, my question is, your essay addresses your Nina, your grandma, yet narrates the stories from her perspective and includes details and stories you yourself must not have experienced. Did you draw on stories your mother or others told you? Did you interview them for the essay, or did you use your imagination?
So I guess it's addressed to Nina. She's not going to read it, but it's almost meant to be, because it's from her perspective, it's from the view, and it's, for me, it's almost like saying like, I'm empathizing with you. Like I hear this part of your story. Like I understand what you've been through. And I just like, it was me trying to express that like, it's okay. Like she doesn't have to, she's always gonna worry, but she doesn't have to worry because I understand and I'm there, and like I'm in it with her, and I will be with her. My grandparents don't really like talking about things, but I'm really lucky to have like an open communication with my mom, and so I hear a lot of stories from her, and sometimes my grandpa will just like drop random tidbits that are like world changing on me. Like the other day he was talking about how when he came to America, he wanted to be like a forest agent, like for a national park. And I was like, what? And then he was like, but actually I ended up being an engineer. And I'm like, I didn't know you wanted to be a forest. But these little things, like little parts of my family that makes, that's made our identities what they are. I think they're so rich, and because they are so like small, I think it was really meaningful to put everything together in sort of a narrative of these my nice like 3 lifetimes, but also our 3 lifetimes, my grandma, my mom, and me. Yeah.
Thank you for that. That was wonderful. Now, for Andrea? Yeah, next is Andrea. Andrea is
Andrea's right
here. Your essay highlights language barriers and gender identity issues in a moving reflection. Your complex intersectional perspectives are cleverly unified by the motif of liminal space, a transitional space between thresholds and boundaries. Your essay ends with positive hopes for the future. Reflecting on your essay, what things make you feel hopeful and what do you hope for?
Yeah, starting with the concept of liminal spaces. This is a phrase that I picked up from a writer I follow on Twitter. They go by Hot Stuff on that site, and they write a lot about their experiences as a Japanese American, and how, they document like through poetry and writing, their journey to kind of towards cultural understanding. And they've spoken about many things, including like that they're taking Japanese classes in college, right? And how they're connecting with other Japanese people that they know and holding conversations in Japanese and hearing like about like those stories about moving forward in their understanding really like makes me feel like, oh yes, like that there is a place for me to in this world where I can start to explore more than what I already know and be able to find that sense of understanding and move toward a sense of peace. And like just I love I love reading stories about by other Asian American writers, because we all have like there's obviously a lot of similarities and there's a lot of differences too. And I think hearing about all these various experiences and how they culminate really helps me to understand myself as well. And it gives me something to aspire to. I think in Everything Everywhere All at Once, there's this moment with Joy and her mother. And I felt like throughout the course of that film, I felt a lot of connection to Joy. And at the end of the film, sorry, spoilers if you guys haven't seen it, but they have a really, really sweet moment and I cried. And just like, like stories like that and other like novels and poems that I've read about this kind of experience and, moving towards connection and understanding that really makes me feel hopeful. And as for what I hope for, I mean, I hope that I'll be able to tell stories like that, that give other people that sense of hope and, to connect more with my mom, to, obviously to spend more time with my dad, and maybe one day learn Mandarin. So yeah, but I just think that hope is so important, to echo a sentiment by Wong and Everything Everywhere All at Once. Guys, can you tell I'm obsessed? Yeah, he says, that his kindness doesn't make him weak, that this is how he fights and this is how he survives. That's why I keep that sense of like optimism with me. Yeah.
Terrific, thanks. Michelle. We really appreciate how your essay gave a sense of community and culture beyond your own family, yet remained centered in your family's personal experiences. We had several questions, but we wanted to just stick with one, because your essay had so many dimensions. But we wanted to ask you, you wrote about your parents' naturalization. What did that mean for you and them?
So my parents came to the United States over 20 years ago. So they got naturalized or became American citizens. a couple of years ago, but I was there for their ceremonies in person. And I feel like this experience was something that was like really personal because I was like there and I was able to experience it. While a lot of the stories, like I just heard about them, but being able to experience it definitely like changed my perspective and made me like more interested in learning more about like my past. I feel like for what it's meant for them, it's like the basic thing is like they can vote now in like elections. And I feel like that's something that was really important to them. Like my mom goes out to every single election and votes, like even though she doesn't know like anyone, she's like, I'll still go. Yeah. So like, and then I can always go with her and it's like a night, it's really cool to be able to see like democracy and be able to like, you know, go through the ballot system and seeing like everyone check in and things like that. So I feel like that's like the physical part of it, but I also feel like the emotional or mental part of it, it's like kind of building a bridge, like even though that they're now American citizens, like my grandparents still live in China and like a lot of my relatives still do. So I feel like it's still like a connection between the United States and China. And like I haven't really been to China that much, like especially due to COVID, so we haven't been able to go back. But I feel like I've been there a couple of times and like it's been a really nice experience. And like even though like I did not live in China or it's like I didn't go to school there or anything like that, it's still really nice to have like a connection and experience to be able to go back and connect with my like grandparents and other relatives.
So Kelly, in your essay, you say that your mother isn't good at showing affection and giving words of affirmation. But your essay does that so well that it's hard for me to believe that your mother doesn't do it too. Professor Wong and I appreciate the vivid details about the morning you drove off without defrosting your windshield properly and then realized that your mother had been doing this all the time. And the embarrassment you felt first for bringing home cooked Chinese food to school and then for asking your mom to stop fixing Chinese food. So in your essay, you felt embarrassed about both. What would you say has been the greatest challenge for your mother in raising you or you in negotiating cultural differences in that school?
So I think just to give everyone a little background on my essay, in the beginning, my essay was really about, as a child, me feeling like my mom was not very good at showing me affection. But as I grew up and as I reflected on all of these experiences, I realized that this was not true at all. And so I think that my mother has done a great job in raising me in terms of making sure I am very in tune with my own culture. She has forced me to go to Chinese school every Sunday for now 14 years. And when I was younger, I really didn't realize the true beauty of it. And now as I'm older, I've realized that it's so important for us to know our own language, our history, our ancestors. And something that I really like is when I was younger, all the culture classes, so every day at Chinese school, half of it is learning Chinese and then half of it is culture class. And when I was younger, the culture class would be, learning Chinese yo-yo or making Chinese crafts or doing calligraphy. But now as we get older, it's turned into discussions. And this year it focused around being a Chinese American, growing up in America, the hardships we face in terms of family, language, and our surroundings. So it's allowed me to really understand how my mother has instilled Chinese culture into my life, making sure we celebrate the holidays, making sure we always have Chinese food at home, making sure we are always speaking Chinese at home. My grandparents who live with us only speak Chinese, they don't speak any English. So being able to communicate with them all the time is really, it's really great. And in negotiating cultural differences in my school, I have taken on a lot of leadership positions. I'm class president, I'm a part of the NHS board, and restorative justice community. And really, I've realized that I enjoy taking on so many of these positions because I want to be able to speak up for the Chinese community in my own school. At the restorative justice community, I have made it a point to make sure our English teachers include a story about Chinese Americans throughout in our curriculum. And one that we've started to read is The Paper Menagerie. It's a really good story. It's about this boy who has a Chinese mother and an American father, and his resentment towards his mother because he didn't understand. And later on, he realizes the importance of his mother's culture and how it's a part of him. And so I think that reading these stories in school have helped with the discrimination that the Chinese community faces. So I really, that's my main purpose in standing up for the Chinese community, is to make sure that people understand our culture as much as we understand it.
So now, thank you for that. So now I'm going to turn to our online participants. Nicole Wong. Nicole, we love the fact that your essay captured so many emotions and intimate memories, while also honestly touching on your real difficulties. At the beginning of the essay, you're very critical of yourself and the burden your health problems impose, but the end looks forward to continued closeness. Did writing the essay make you feel closer to your mother? Did it cause you to remember and realize anything that you hadn't known or thought about when you began?
I think like writing the essay, it first, before it like made me feel closer to my mom, it definitely gave me this chance to like reflect on like how even though like I might not see like my health issues as like a big problem because I'm like so used to it, but to my mom, every time we're in the waiting room, I can see the pain in her eyes, and it just makes me so sad having to know that your daughter after school, you have to take her to like a doctor's appointment, and you have to leave like late at night, like at 7 p.m. You have to walk home together. And it's really just so sad. Like I think like as a mom, for her to know that your child is maybe not the same as other people, because my mom's always like, oh, I don't know any like people like kids as sick as you. Like kids are supposed to have like great immune systems, and but like at the same time, I understand why she thinks that way. But I think writing this essay also really showed how much love she had for me. Even though there's this one part of her that might be sad that her child has to go through so much, there's always this one part of her that takes me to the supermarket after to buy like my favorite fish, to buy like vegetables for dinner. And there's always this one part of her that as a mother, she feels a sense of responsibility for me, and I can feel her love, and I could feel how much she has to go through, but she's still staying strong for me. And I think I don't really show that I appreciate her a lot, but really, I'm really grateful for everything she has done for me. And I think writing this essay has made me realize how loving your child isn't, you don't have to like show them through like saying I love you. Like you don't have to like do some like obvious things like buy them presents and stuff. Her just taking me to like the doctors after school shows a lot of love to me already. And throughout the essay, I also talked about how I feel angry towards my mom sometimes because of how much pressure she puts on me. But I also can't be selfish and say like, oh, I don't understand where she's coming from because of like the Chinese background, like the generational gap, like the different traditions and culture. I can understand why she might want to put pressure on me, but at the end of the day, she always tells me just be happy. There's really no point in living your life and comparing yourself to like who like I'm like comparing you to, because like at that moment, I'm just like, I just want to like motivate you to like work better and like work for yourself, because she always tells me that you're working hard not for me, you're working hard for your future, and I want that good future for you. And I understand where she's coming from. And towards the end, I tell her, in my essay, I say how I want to be this perfect daughter for her, but there's this part of me that knows that I will never be that perfect daughter for her. And as much as I hate myself for that, I also know that there's no way you could be a perfect daughter. And I think it's, as a mom, they like you, they love you for your flaws and who you are. And they don't want you to change and become like whoever they're comparing you to. They, at the end of the day, my mom just wants me to be happy. And I can feel that, because I think as I've gotten older, she constantly reminds me that you don't have to be what other people expects you to be. And even though like I obviously want to show her that, oh, I want to get to a good college, I want to do all this and all that, but I know that I can't do all of that at the same time. But yeah.
That's a lot to come to. So sounds like you had a really productive writing experience. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. So Matthew Wong, we really enjoyed reading about family and language in your essay. Can you describe for the audience the key themes, and if you were to continue writing on this subject, how you might want to continue exploring one of those themes?
So there is a quote from the Joy Luck Club that has always resonated with me, and it goes, then it occurs to me, they are frightened. In me, they see their own children, just as ignorant, just as unmindful of all the truths and hopes they had brought to America. So when I was writing this essay, I really wanted to connect my story with my parents. Whenever we got into a fight, or whenever we got into an argument, or any time at the dinner table, they would always remind me of their stories. My mom came really young after the big civil war in China, so she was displaced, and so was my dad. My dad was also displaced when he was young, and they both worked really hard to get where we are today. And every time they would discuss with me about their stories, it would always have this sort of unrelenting weight that they would put on me. Like they always wanted me to be better than what happened to them. They always wanted me to have a better life than what they could give me. And I always struggled with that, because I felt like when I was born, I was given this weight by them, that they couldn't understand who I was, and that I couldn't understand who they were. I did not grow up. I did not grow up in certain Chinese culture, and I didn't even understand who being Chinese was until recently. And that always disconnected me from my parents, who didn't understand what being American, what being in a different culture, growing up in a different culture was like. So when I was writing this essay, I really based it off the theme of being needing to be loved and seen by the ones you love, because I couldn't see who my parents were, and my parents couldn't see who I was. So a lot of times in my essay, I would really pull off of like figurative language, like pulling a ball of string just to get to the dinner table, or even what their dreams and aspirations were of me. And I did not match that. Like I have an older brother who really matched who they wanted me to be, and I could not compare myself, because I was not him. And it really led to a lot of fights and a lot of disagreements over what they wanted me to be over what I wanted to be. So when I was writing this essay, I really connected to the stories that my parents told me and the themes that my parents left with me, and also connected it to how I grew up. I grew up with these themes, and I grew up with these messages and took them to heart. But but as I say in my essay, I am not them. I will never be them, and I will never understand what their experiences are. So in this essay, I repeat the themes and the stories that my parents have told me, but I also tell them what my story is, how they molded me, how they shaped me to be who I am today. And really, my whole goal with this essay was to have them understand who I was, so we could bridge a connection between what they made me to be and who I am today. So really these themes were to connect with not just Chinese American experiences, but also with many immigrant experiences, and anybody who really has issues with their parents and being having the need to be seen and loved by the ones you love. Really, I want any writing that I do relating to this topic and even this essay just to connect with that theme.
Thank you, Matthew. I think you've stated the theme of the essay contest. And also explained the enduring appeal of Amy Tan very well. Megan Tone, am I saying your name right?
It's Megan.
Megan. This essay was characterized by strong themes of appreciation for your parents and their sacrifices. But we know all family relationships are complex. So we want to ask you, what kinds of challenges with intergenerational relations have you had, or do you anticipate having in the future?
Yeah, so when it comes to relationships between different generations, I've definitely faced some challenges within my own family, which is expressed in my essay. And through my essay, it shows how much I appreciate my parents and everything they've sacrificed to provide this life for me. But it's also important to remember that family dynamics are very complicated and have a lot of layers. So one challenge I've encountered is trying to bridge the gap between our different generations. So as time goes on, values and expectations change, and that can lead to differences in how parents and kids see things due to the shift from traditional beliefs and values to ones that we have today. It takes open and honest conversations to navigate these differences and to find a common ground. And another challenge I anticipate in the future is definitely finding the right balance between independence and listening to my parents' guidance and what they want from me. As I pursue my dreams and carve my own path in life, there might be moments where my parents' concerns and desires kind of clash in with what I want for myself. For example, I really want to study abroad in college, and my parents might be a bit hesitant about that since it is dangerous and it is a non-traditional way of learning. It's a delicate balancing act to respect their wisdom, but also to follow my own aspirations. And then cultural and generational gaps can also present challenges in understanding each other's experiences. So growing up in different times and environments, my parents and I may have different perspectives on things like my career choices, relationships, and societal norms. And what we need is to show our vulnerability and be willing to learn from each other. In terms of intergenerational relationships, it's a two-way street in a way where both sides need to make an effort to understand and support each other. So communication and compromise and just respect are key to building and maintaining a harmonious relationship with our parents. So yeah, while intergenerational relations can have their challenges, I think that as we grow together, we can overcome these obstacles and then create a meaningful and healthy relationship with our parents.
Thank you. This is very wise. So for our final person online, Zhang's essay Mama moves the reader with strong imagery and raw feelings to better understand how the lack of words for emotional communication affects a child. Even though she recognizes her mother's tacit expression of love, the writer invites her mother to break their silence together. So Zhang, tell us with this very moving essay. Do you feel that writing this essay has altered your views of your mother and yourself? What kind of dialogue would you like to have? What new things would you like to talk about?
Yeah. So yeah, I definitely think that writing this essay has definitely like altered my views of my mother and myself. I had to like very deeply reflect upon, our history together, the places we've been, and then also the conflicts that we've had. And I think I realized that she, like me, is not perfect. She has her fears and her dreams, and it's her first time being a mother, the same way it's my first time being a daughter, and that our relationship, like any relationship, has its flaws. And I just think that this also leads to the dialogue I'd like to have with her in the future, in that I think we should discuss more also on our regrets and our mistakes rather than just our successes, because there are also, in my opinion, important aspects of both of us as people and as a family unit. And I actually saw this quote on your website. The more we tell our story, the more it lives within us. And I think in telling my story through this competition and in bridging this gap in showing my essay to her, I think that's how we could break the silence between us.
Good. So storytelling.
It's a nice way
Yes.
to end it.
I definitely think, I think that, our generational history, heritage, and also just us as people should not go forgotten. We should definitely address all of that. We should address, not only just the good parts, but also the flaws and the parts that are maybe embarrassing or that are not, as good. So
Totally agree. Thank you.
So I think you can see from the comments of these young writers that these were very powerful reflections, and there was a lot of really mature thinking and feeling that really came through in these essays. I know you're touched by their words, and I can see from your faces that this is you're really hearing not just from your own children, but also from the other students here that, and I hope students, you can see that writing can have such a powerful effect on people. I hope you could feel the emotional weight in the room as we all absorb even the themes of your writing. And so we have a few minutes to open it up. You can ask questions of one another, or we'd love to hear from those in the audience as well.
I would take the chance to ask the first question. This is Pauline. I'm going to direct my question to Matthew because two reasons. One reason is Matthew is one of the very few male participants in the essay contest. This is a phenomenon we always see. We have smaller male representation in these programs and events. So that's one reason. The other reason is the issue or the conflicts you raised in your article is very common. I read many of those essays. I have seen the theme in many other essays. That's the parents' expectation and your own aspiration. So there is a big gap between parents' expectation and your own aspiration. And that often is the source of intergenerational conflict, right? So what I want to ask you is, obviously, there's a cultural difference there. I think American culture is more individualistic, more focusing on personal pursuit versus traditional culture like Chinese culture focuses more on your obligation to the society or obligation to the family. So that's the underlying cultural elements to that conflict. But I want to ask Matthew, after you share, I don't know whether you have shared your articles with your parents. If you did they have any, did that have some impact on them in terms of the changing their attitude, of maybe they will consider more your own aspiration, your personal pursuit versus they're imposing their own expectations on you?
No, yeah, definitely. I did laugh at the comment that there's a small male representation because I have seen that in a lot of essay competitions I have entered. But I have shared my letter with my parents, and well, my mom read it, but my dad, who cannot read or speak English, and I have a tough relationship with him because his Mandarin is not as good as most other parents, and I don't speak Fujonese, so we really have a tough relationship there. But when I did share my letter with my parents, my mom did get really emotional, and my dad, his first reaction was a little confusing. He thought that I actually made her cry. I actually made her cry out of like some sort of like menacing way. So he almost got a little heated about it. But when my mom explained it to my dad, my dad really did not get as emotional as my mom, because one of the things that my parents, and obviously my dad in particular, has always been adamant about is that sons should not be emotional, should not really show when they're most vulnerable. For the good of the family, they should be the rock. They should be the support that everyone else bases off of. And while I'm not the oldest in my family, I still have that burden of being a son. And I know daughters also have a burden as well, but that's one of the main burdens that I really explored in my essay that differed from other perspectives. So when I shared my essay with both my mom and my dad, my mom really found that I was not going to understand them, and they were never going to understand me. So my mom really told me after she read the essays that she supports whatever and whoever I'm going to be in the future, because in the end, I will always be her son. My dad is still has a little expectations about me, but really, I think he deep down, I know he also loves me, and I love my parents. While their expectations have not fully waned, have not fully gone away, after reading this letter, they have become more open about who I want to be in the future instead of what expectations they had. And I know in listening to their stories, I know where these expectations come from, because they didn't have a lot growing up, and now that I'm growing up and I have all this because they worked hard, they don't want me to work just as hard to give if I ever have children, then my children that kind of experience. They want me to have a better life, and and like a lot of immigrants and like a lot of Chinese Americans in particular, I know we all have this struggle of our parents having this expectation, giving us this burden when we're really young, and really through discussions, through arguments, through even good times, we always still have this burden that what if who I want to be does not shape the way my parents want me to be. And obviously, we all hold the values and lessons that our parents have taught us. But what I really wanted to touch on in my essay in particular is that while I hold these lessons and values, I'm not going to be them, and most likely they will never understand my experiences, because my experiences differ from theirs. So in this letter, I told my story, because I feel like from an immigrant's child experience or a Chinese American experience, many parents don't really get that kind of deep, vulnerable stuff, especially from Chinese American sons who always have to keep this type of emotion in, this type of vulnerability in, because for the betterment of their family, they have to be the rock. And obviously, with this essay, I just spilled everything out. Like I made my mom bawl, and my dad again was a little confused on why she was bawling, but I still that kind of difference will never go away. But I guess we just have to learn to accept that and just connect on the similarities and the lessons that our parents have taught us, because that is one of the things that will never go away.
Thank you.
So Matthew, I hope you will authorize the museum to post your essay, because now we all want to read it. And also, for those in the audience, you're welcome, if you don't have a question, to just reflect on what you're feeling right now. First, I am very touched by the panelists and his internet to express your personal feeling, your family relationship. It takes courage. Okay, it takes great courage. And then I'm a mother of 2 and grandmother of 4. And I've been in this country 52 years. The cultural divide on top of the generation divide is tough. You know, the there is always there. And then we have it. And then throwing the political, you know, the China's in the news. I was born and raised in Taiwan. My parents are in China. So we had a tough, you know, years. So I have to congratulate you to be courageous. And if I have to argue with my kids, I can't win, because they don't speak a lot of language. It's the old survival, right? So if I have to express myself, fight them with the argue with them in English, I'll lose, and I'll lose my temper. Right? So I learned to write it out, right? Write it on letter. I think for me, writing directly to that person is a very powerful tool. And you have to think it through, and you put it on the paper. And you know, when you speak, everything goes, right? But when you write, so keep writing, keep writing. Beautiful. Thank you.
We cannot read the fine print from here.
Maybe Ira, do you want to just read the questions?
Question.
So, this is 2 questions. What is the biggest conflict between you and your parents? How did you mend your relationship after it? And then I heard many Chinese Americans just can't have a good relationship with their parents as other American classmates. Is this true?
Anybody?
This is for the writers.
I would say probably the lengthiest conflict that I've had with my parents would probably be with my mom. We've had multiple disagreements about the way that I live my life, you know, and the kind of what she wants for my life as opposed to what I want for my life. You know, she always wants me to clean my room cleaner than it is and wake up earlier and, you know, like do more exercise. And like, I understand that, like, you know, I understand that she really wants me to have a good life and to be healthy and well, but also it's so hard to wake up in the morning. And it's, you know, like I have like, and also just like, we have very differing perspectives on how to live life, right? Like she is very much of a disciplinarian. You know, she's very into, you know, like toughness and working hard. And I think I've always been the more relaxed kind of person in the family with my lifestyle. And, you know, I want to, you know, like explore and create and, you know, like there's been like friction between us. but I think we had a conversation in the car once, where she kind of expressed to me a lot of the challenges that she faced earlier in her life when I was much younger. And she was very vulnerable with me, and it helped me really to feel like I understood where she was coming from and why she felt the way she did about, you know, how I live and why she wants what she wants for me. And so I really think that the way ultimately for us, the way that I would sum it up is that it really helped to just sit down and be vulnerable and just like spill out all of that like messy, like uncomfortable garbage. Because in the end, you know, it helps both of us to recognize that we both, in the end, we're just people who really love each other. And ultimately that's not ever gonna change.
Great.
Yeah.
Anyone else want to respond to the question?
There's another question saying, do you feel that you, as the child of your parents, have to be the one to understand your parents because their generation most likely will never understand you most of their life?
Everyone heard the question? Did everyone hear the question? The panelists online, do you guys hear the question? Raise your hands if you did hear the question. Okay.
I want to share. I feel like because of this like generation difference, we also have to be understanding to our parents because we have to understand that, like for immigrant parents especially, they have been they have been in China for so long. You can't expect them to like change like their traditional mindset, you know. And personally, like throughout these years, I have learned to like forgive my parents for like not like their misunderstandings and being able to know that, oh, I don't want to like talk back to my parents because there's really no point in doing that. And also it's not like the right way to like, you know, like tell them you don't agree with them because in their point of view, they don't feel respected. And I feel like as a child, they're my parents. I still have to respect them. I can't just like treat them as like they're like my classmate or anything like that. I can't like disagree with them like, oh yeah, no, you're wrong. I still have to understand that they come from a different perspective and I have to try to be forgiving to them. So I feel like we do have a duty to like be respectful to our parents, and we can't expect them to understand us because they have been like they have like this traditional mindset that isn't easily like changed as us because we're still like young, we're still like adapting to our environment, like we still like understand different perspectives, so we can't really force them to understand us, but we have to learn how to forgive them.
I would actually agree. I actually do agree with you, Nicole. There is obviously when we in understanding our parents, like there are some things we have to be a little more lenient about because their thinking is not like ours. I know personally that in all the disagreements and conversations that I've had with my parents, I've had to be the one to try and understand their point of view because most likely they like, even though they try to understand who we are because obviously they're the ones who raised us, they don't really know like how we are raised because there's always going to be that difference between us. And one of the things that I've learned to accept is that we as Chinese American immigrant children will never fully understand their experiences, how they grew up, what they grew up with, what values and what traditions they were taught with. And obviously as Chinese immigrant parents, they will never understand what we grew up with, what our values are, what we experience, because especially with immigrants and their children, things that even like growing up in different countries and different lands can even impact how these experiences will differ. So while parents, I guess they do try to understand us like one of the core examples is that if when they apologize, they don't apologize, rather they will give you a plate of fruit like that. And I have gotten a plate of fruit many times before because of the many arguments that I've had with my parents. But of course, each of the times my parents have tried to understand me, and I've tried to understand them. But as immigrant children, I've always felt like that we had to be more lenient, we have to be more understanding of our parents, because we're the ones that have, I feel like we're the ones that have to begin that change, because we are the ones who are impacted. And maybe if we never wrote these letters, our parents would never understand what values, what we grew up with. And if we never did that, if we never took that first step, then we wouldn't be having this conversation with our parents and with each other today.
Oh, oh, you can go. Oh, should I? Okay.
Yeah, you.
Okay. I agree with what people have been saying, but I also think that it's not impossible for our parents to understand us and to connect with us. Like with my mother, like we do have our differences, but I think that like once I showed her the letter, once we actively started communicating, she's been able to see things from my perspective, and we've gotten a lot closer. Like she's actually able to say like sorry instead of give me a plate of fruit. And then so I think that it's like possible for parents to definitely change, and for us to see their perspective, given that there's like the right kind of communication, and that we're actively trying to bridge this gap. But yeah, but I mean, it's difficult, it definitely is, but I definitely think it's possible.
Yeah, I think, for me personally, I really believe that it is a case of needing to meet your parents where they're willing to meet you. For example, like, my mother, I don't think she really understands me as well as I would like, and I don't think she ever really will fully understand my perspective. But I know that she's trying for me, and so I have to meet her where she is, and I have to try and understand, why she treats me the way she does, and what she has gone through. But with my dad, I would definitely, like, he's been very understanding of me, and he's been very willing to like listen to how I'm feeling, and really to take my perspective into account when it comes to like all of his decisions, and how like my brother and I are raised. And so, like, obviously we do have to have that kind of flexibility and that forgiveness and that compassion, that understanding, that sometimes there are places of understanding that our parents can't reach. But I also think it's important to keep our faith in them, and to to believe in the possibility that they are trying, and that they might be able to.
Can I also comment out a little bit? So what I've heard a lot about the panelists about there's conflict and we are trying to understand each other. And Andrea mentioned was the only one were listening, right? So the communication starts with listening, and from when children grow up, the children are the ones that do most listening, and the parents are the ones who do the most talking. Yes. To improve that communication, from my experience, the parents are the ones should be making an effort to listen more, listen without judgment. Even if you don't agree with the children, at least put your heart out there, just listen to what they're saying. I think that's important. Great.
Nicole has her hand raised.
Nicole? You have something to say?
Oh, no, wait, oh, sorry.
So any last comments or reflections before we wrap up from either the writers or anyone in the audience?
I have a question. Like, were you guys like worried about getting in trouble at all from your parents? Like, embarrassed
to write anything that you really wanted to say?
I will say I was a little bit hesitant to write about my issues with gender in the letter. Because my identity is already confusing enough to me, like my parents, oh, how am I ever gonna explain that to them? I was like, I really had a, like, shouldn't I moment? And then I was like, well, we're gonna have, if I'm gonna submit to a contest about bridging cultural gaps and making connections between parents and children, I might as well commit to it. And you know, I really think that I'm glad I did it. Yeah, definitely, you know, it's something that I've battled with a lot, and especially that I think, you know, that I'll always be a little bit hesitant to talk about with my parents, just because, like, I don't always know if they'll really get what I'm saying. But it's good to try. I think it's always good to try.
Anybody else? Okay, Matthew, go first.
So definitely when I wrote this letter, I was okay, this is kind of sugarcoating. Yeah, I was afraid. I was afraid about how my parents would react. In my letter, I do like say like a lot of like I don't want to say a lot of criticisms of how they may think of things, and obviously obviously I do say how they have worked really hard to give me what I've had today, give me what I have today. But I've always had this sort of like we've always had this sort of misunderstanding between each other. And in this letter, this is like one of my biggest things that I allude to in the letter, that there's this misunderstanding between them. And when I initially wrote this letter, both of my parents didn't know I was writing it until the day before today. And when when I told them, oh, I have a meeting, I have like a panel to go to about this letter that I was writing to you. And so I actually showed them this letter yesterday, and how they reacted was what all happened yesterday. And I really held it off because I was scared about how they would react, because I guess a lot of times when it comes to stricter parents that show love through wanting their child to be better than who they were, there's always this like little like fear that how will they react if I show them this letter that I love them, but there's some things that they could do to like maybe change a little bit. So obviously it was a bit it's a bit scary to even write this letter and even show them before today. So yeah.
Okay, Nicole.
Oh, Nicole dropped off for a second.
Huh? She dropped off.
Yeah, maybe for internet had a hiccup or something.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe we have to wait
Okay.
for a little bit.
Okay, yeah, okay, she's still not.
I will just say, in reading the essays, and I think Patty, you can also attest to this, there's a lot of very raw feelings shared. And there's, you know, there's a lot of love shared and a lot of pain. And it would be interesting to hear how the parents themselves, like that letter, it makes me curious, like what letter would the parent write to the child? Because
Strong reaction from the parents.
yeah, I mean, given that the what was shared by, you know, the other students, some of them were in 8th grade when they wrote this, or just coming out of 8th grade, right? So they're very young, but they are just very in tune. In some ways, this gave them a chance to reflect very deeply. So there's a lot of mature feelings, very real feelings, that I think it's because of their age that they're able to like pour this out into, I think, Patty, I don't know, pour it out onto the page. I mean, I don't think I have ever written in the way that you all have written, which is to share with strangers, basically, these really painful, but also, yeah, the conflict and the story of the family. You can feel it. All of our families are very complex, And it is just front and center. In each of these essays, you can feel these are not a cookie cutter happy families. It's real in that all families are complex, all people are complex, and you can just, that's what I felt when I was reading. I was like, wow, this is not just a Chinese American or Asian American story, but this is the human family, the human experience is deep, right? And so I don't know, that really came out for me.
Yeah, and what you're saying reminds me that writing is work. And that every one of you who wrote a personal essay, you had to really dig, you had to cut close to the bone, which is a metaphor in many uses. And that when you read things that have been published that are autobiographical, it seems very accomplished. It may seem effortless, but now that you have done it, you can see the choices you have to make, the choices about privacy, the choice like, well, how do I make a good public statement before I even let myself write what I want to write? So first write what you want to write, and then later on, you must think about what you want to publish. These are two different issues that just by writing these 4-page essays, you're encountering those issues, right? Which all writers encounter and all autobiographical writers continue to encounter. So you're all very brave writers, and the benefit is that we're having this fascinating conversation. We're all in this room together, and now we know we're not alone, right? The things that we've been going through, other people have been going through. And that does not diminish the importance of your individuality, but rather it expands your experience.
I have one more comment. Actually, when I read Scarlet's beautiful article, I think one of the themes came out of her article is the immigrants' anxiety and pressure to assimilate. She talked about her grandmother's always feeling trying to be part of the America, and sometimes I think all of our parents feel this pressure trying to assimilate. But ironically, we try to be like white American, but what we do actually is precisely Chinese. When we do to our parents, like to our kids, it's precisely Chinese, like your grandmother, right? What she did to your mom or she all Chinese way, right? So it's so ironic. But I would say I'm not saying Chinese way is bad. I think there's a lack of nuance in our way to treat our children. Also lack of explanation. We just dictate. We don't explain why we do that, right? Why you should do that. Why you should wake up very early, clean up your room, study hard, and get A's. We don't explain that because we grew up in a different culture. Everything is already part of us. We don't have to explain it. And we assume our children, they are born out of our body. They look just like us. They should know everything we already knew. We don't explain that to them. I think even sometimes when we explain, it's very dry, very boring. So I do think communication, communication is so important. Two-way communication. I like what you said. We need to listen more. We need to understand the other side more. I think in the end we can come in the middle, right? We can have some compromise. I wouldn't say that. I think there is a vital role the parents need to play is being the guide. provide advice and guidance for the kids. You cannot just say, let them, do what they want to do. But still, you need to listen. You need to, from parents' point of view, we need to listen. We need to, sometimes we need to compromise. And my personal experience is that if my children don't do what I want them to do, eventually I will come to terms to that. I will eventually accept that, because after all, I love them, right? So for Matthew or for whoever out there, don't lose your hope or lose your hope on your parents, because when you pursue whatever you want to pursue, that's different from your parents' expectation. Eventually, your parents will accept it. They will still love you. They will love you regardless. So
Nicole is back. Nicole, did you, sorry about that. Do you want to, we'd love to hear from you if you still want to say what you were going to say earlier.
Sorry, wait, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, sorry my internet got unstable. But I was gonna say, what was the question before? I forgot. Like I kind of forgot. What the question was.
whether you were afraid to fully express yourself, knowing that your parents may read your essay.
Oh yeah, I wasn't gonna show my mom, but then my sister told my mom like I won, and my mom's like, "Oh, can you show me what you wrote?" And I got scared, and I translated it using like a translator, and I was telling my mom the translator is translating it incorrect. Like this is not what I want to say, because I was scared that it's gonna come off a different way, and I was like explaining it to her, because in the essay I wrote about like extremely like vulnerable stuff, and she's like, I wanted to post it in my WeChat moment, but now I'm not gonna post it because it's just like so like there's just like so like personal stuff that like I was talking to her about like my eating disorders, and like how like I wanted her to understand me, but there's just some part of her that was like mad at me, and I just felt like she didn't understand me, and I didn't want her to read it because I think I didn't want to bring that up again to her. Like I didn't want to remind her of like our arguments before. So I was like really scared to show her. But I think after showing her, she started to tell me about like how she felt, because I think like to be honest, a lot of Asian parents, they don't want to like they don't cry in front of you. They don't want to show that they understand what you're trying to like tell them. And I think like my mom, she was like she was just like also like being extremely vulnerable. Like she was crying, and she was like telling me how she really felt, and how she started to like understand herself and me too. So and she's like, she doesn't want me to expect so much from her because she's trying to do her best to end. Yeah.
So I hope we can thank you so much, Nicole. Thank you to our writers and our parents. And I hope we can give our writers who are online and also sitting up here a huge hand for their bravery. Thank you, everybody. All right.